Hello, hello, hello. It's 1 p.m. here in the UK on a Sunday afternoon, and I'm recording my first live show for some time. It's probably been at least a month, maybe even 2 months since I last did one of these extended live shows. And I had a few messages from people who say they prefer the longer videos, more entertaining, etc. So I wasn't sure whether these were too much of a success or not. So if you're watching this, and I predict you're probably not watching it live, you're probably watching this back, let me know what you prefer. Do you prefer the longer shows, or do you prefer the sort of shorter, quick fire videos that I tend to do more regularly? Just before I get into what I'm keen to discuss today, to let you know what I've got coming up on the channel in the next week or so. I want to do a video on the Eubank versus Spike O'Sullivan fight. I think that's a really interesting fight, and that's one that I think is going to really capture the public's imagination as we get closer and closer and closer to fight night on that occasion. So you can expect me to come up with a video on that and produce that on the channel fairly imminently. Joseph Parker is fighting Callie Meehan in New Zealand. I'll look to do a post-fight video on that. Joseph Parker's a fighter who I've been following fairly closely, of late on the channel, and I will certainly want to cover that fight and let you know my thoughts of how he gets on, positively or negatively. I've also had a request which I thought was fairly interesting that I wanted to cover about the tests that a heavyweight prospect should encounter, the questions that a heavyweight prospect should have to answer on their rise to the top. Obvious examples would be Joseph Parker, Hughie Fury, Anthony Joshua, Dillian White, those kind of characters. So I'm going to talk about that as well at some stage in the next week. So that's just a few plugs. Stay tuned to the channel and we'll come on to those stuff. In terms of what I want to talk about today, I want to talk about the fights that happened last night in Box Nation. Terry Flanagan versus Diego Magdaleno. Liam Smith versus John Thompson. And I also want to talk a bit about the British boxing scene, a few guys who I think are perhaps slightly overrated in the current British boxing scene, which I'll come on to later on. Finally, some time at the end to discuss any sort of major upcoming fights or anything that is particularly kicking off in the chat or anything of that nature. So that's kind of what we're going to discuss today, the two title fights for last night, a bit more about the British scene at the end. And, we won't keep it too rigid. It'll be relatively fluid throughout. If you're watching this live, please do drop me a comment in the chat. Let me know that you're watching. Say hello. Any questions that come up whatsoever, we'll be keen to discuss and have a bit of back and forth. Before I get started, just to quickly say, I need to do something about my Twitter followers, because my Twitter followers are terribly low, and I'm going to try and use Twitter more and more going forward. So please do give me a follow on Twitter at Boxing Gossip. Anyway, looking at the chat, Terence says, "Are you looking forward to Triple G Lemieux? Going to be a big drama show, a real dramatic knockout." Yeah, I've got a pen and paper here. I'm going to write down anything like that comes up to discuss at the end. So we'll discuss GGG Lemieux. I want to make sure I stick slightly to task with the fights first, and we'll do it in some kind of order, but I will come to that. Rumours, last night's Box Nation cards was very good. Stalker Evans was a real war. The two headliners too. Callum says hello. Hi, Callum. Gaz says, "What's your view on Eddie Hearn taking the piss with pay-per-views?" Yeah, I'll write that down as well, Gaz. We'll come on to that. And Rumours also talks about James Degale's $3.5 million payoff, which, yeah, is another good thing to talk about. So there we are. That's one of the good things about these live shows. It's so fluid, because I've come on to talk about 2 or 3 things, and I've already written down 3 good topics to discuss at the end. So Triple G Lemieux, pay-per-views, and James Degale payoff. So I will come to all of those at the end, but before I sort of get wildly off track, I want to talk about the fights from last night. So with that in mind, let's get up and running and let's get cracking. First and foremost, we're going to talk Diego Magdaleno versus Terry Flanagan, and it was a 2-round fight. This I must admit, I didn't watch the Box Nation card live last night. I was otherwise engaged with a family commitment, unfortunately, but I watched it back this morning. I've seen the fights, so I can hopefully talk about it and do it some justice. Magdaleno, I must admit, was poor beyond belief last night. What I don't understand is fighters who failed to prepare and failed to come up with any sort of tactical idea as to how to get a job done. I think that's really unforgivable. You know, it's all right having a plan A, a plan B, and a plan C if they don't work out in a fight. You know, you can just be beaten by the better man. But what I don't get is why you turn up to a world title fight without even having a plan A. And we've seen that a few times recently. We saw that when Frankie Gavin fought Cal Brook. You know, what was his plan to win the fight? Similarly, we saw it last night with Magdaleno. Flanagan was a bigger man. Yeah, Magdaleno was coming up from the weight class below, super featherweight. Flanagan was more rangy. He had more reach. And seemingly, Diego Magdaleno had absolutely no idea, no opinion, no tactic at all to deal with that, to get inside. He was very, very, very poor, I thought. For a fighter at this level, fighting for a world title, his lack of any sort of tactical awareness was poor beyond belief. Yeah, it really was. Not only was he shorter and as a result less rangy, he also had a ridiculously wide stance. Regular viewers on my channel will know that I talk about wide stances fairly frequently. One person I talk about having a wide stance is Deontay Wilder. And I know it's slightly different with Deontay Wilder, firstly because he's a heavyweight, and secondly because he's 6'7" or something. But we saw the danger of a wide stance last night. And when Deontay Wilder steps up and fights the likes of Vladimir Klitschko, Tyson Fury, I predict that such a wide stance could be similarly exposed as it was by Diego Magdaleno last night. So Magdaleno comes out. He's 5'6" to begin with. Flanagan's got a 3 or 4 inch reach advantage. The guy's stance is so wide, it's ridiculous. Obviously, if your legs are like this, you know, when someone measures how tall you are, your legs are like this. If your legs are like this, you're less than 5'6". So he was 5'6" to begin with, which was a disadvantage enough. You factor in the wide stance, he's 5'3", 5'4", and then he keeps ducking down with his legs out. So the guy is fighting Terry Flanagan, who's 5'9", 5'10", and a rangy guy, and he's fighting him at 5 foot tall. Now Flanagan was simply able to keep him out of range and keep him at the end of his long 1-2. Yeah, it was nothing more complex than that, and it really stopped Magdaleno from doing anything in this fight. Also, you know, when your legs are that wide, it's very hard to balance. Very, very hard to balance. It's hard to go back. This is what I talk about again with Deontay Wilder when he's backing up. But if your legs are close like this, it's quite easy to make small adjustments. If your legs are out like this, you can't just shuffle back. You know, you've got to make big movements. And that's what we saw with Magdaleno. And this is why we saw him being dropped from punches that weren't really that hard from Terry Flanagan, let's be honest. I mean, Flanagan hasn't become some sort of David Haye style puncher overnight. Flanagan is a light puncher, and he was tipping Magdaleno over. Yeah, Magdaleno was getting up. He wasn't knocked out by these punches, but I think he was hurt, definitely hurt. I'm not taking that away. But his stance was so wide, he had such poor balance, that Terry Flanagan's accuracy and just ability to constantly land on him was simply tipping him off balance. For me, it was the stance that lost this fight for Magdaleno. Now, Magdaleno looked poor. I'm not saying Magdaleno would have come and won the fight if his stance was different, but he never gave himself a chance because, you know, he wasn't some guy who was trying to get low and fight on the inside and break up Flanagan's ribs like a Mike Tyson peekaboo style approach. He was standing there at range with this wide stance, and I thought that was absolutely a critical error, which gave him no chance in this fight. Terry Flanagan did well. He did really well. He timed Magdaleno very, very, very nicely. He was counter-punching him, you know, he was waiting, he was picking his spots, he was landing sweet punches. The other thing I thought is watching it on TV, as I say, Magdaleno was so wide and he was so low. He was so open to the uppercut up the middle. And it's very easy to sit there on the sofa, watch the fight and say Magdaleno was open to the uppercut. And yes, he was. He was very, very open to the uppercut. It was very easy for Flanagan to land that punch, and it was hugely effective. But when you're actually in a fight, when you're actually, you know, in a world title fight, fans screaming, you know, the event, it's much harder to see these gaps. It's easy to see it from the sofa, hard to see it when you're a foot away from the opponent. So credit to Terry Flanagan for spotting that deficiency in Magdaleno's game. You know, Magdaleno was open. He was there to be caught with the uppercut. But it's harder to see that when you're actually in a fight. So credit to Flanagan for seeing it. Credit for picking his spot. Credit for timing him well. And I like the way he finished off. You know, Flanagan's not a big puncher. He's a tactician. He's a technician. But when he got his man hurt, he was all over him. You know, he didn't give him a second to move, and he got him out of there. Credit to Terry Flanagan. Really, really good performance. I was impressed. Magdaleno was poor beyond belief. Poor beyond belief. You know, he offered nothing. He had no tactic to beat Terry Flanagan. So we've got to put this in some sort of context here. Having said that, credit must go to Terry Flanagan. You know, world champion. He's won it. He's now defended it. He's going up in the ranks. You know, his 2 fights at world championship level have both ended in 2 rounds. You know, it gives the impression he's some sort of big puncher. I predict there's bigger challenges to come. There's still tests for Terry Flanagan now. I'm not convinced of it just yet. There's still what I perceive to be question marks over his head. But for the level that's in front of him, he's done what he's done, and he's done it very well. Credit Terry Flanagan. I was impressed. I'm just looking into the chat. We're talking about James Degale's wage, which we'll come on to in a minute. And we're talking Degale Butte as well. Perfect. So that's my thoughts on Magdaleno versus Flanagan. I thought that was, you know, a good performance from Terry Flanagan. Well, I'm next going to move on to talk about Liam Smith versus John Thompson. So fight starts, you pretty much have to give John Thompson the first 5 rounds in this fight. Thompson, very lanky guy for light middleweight. I think he's 6'1", maybe a bit taller than that. Has a significant reach and range advantage. Significant over Liam Smith. For the first 4 or 5 rounds, you have to say he outpoints Liam Smith. And he outpoints him for 2 reasons. One, simple activity. You know, Thompson is very, very active. He's throwing a lot of punches. He's got fast hands. Because his hands are fast and he throws combinations, his combinations are quite flashy, quite eye-catching. You can see it, you know, catching the judge's eye. Now, Thompson isn't the biggest puncher. His punches aren't hurting Liam Smith. What he's doing is he's, you know, there's times he's just going boom, 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 boom. And those sort of flurries of punches, when you've got fast hands like that, are eye-catching. Those are the kind of flurries that the judges remember at the end of a round. Yeah, I have Thompson 4 or 5 rounds up after 5 rounds, well on his way to outpointing Liam Smith. Smith, what I would say, he's disciplined. Yeah, his hands are high, his hands are well positioned. He's losing the fight, but he's not taking much punishment. You know, Thompson isn't the biggest puncher to begin with. Smith is maintaining his discipline. You know, Smith is, as I say, he's not taking too much punishment. Even though he's well behind, he's not getting hurt. He's not looking in trouble in the fight. And what Smith is doing is stalking, some ways reminiscent of what Golovkin would do. You know, and by that I mean purely Smith's positioning. He's following Thompson around, sort of cornering him. He's quite low volume, Smith. He's not throwing much. There are certain rounds, like the first round, for example, that Smith, you know, he throws the round away. He doesn't really do anything in that round. He doesn't throw any punches really of note, and he gives it to John Thompson. And you wonder, in hindsight, having watched it back, is it some sort of tactic? Is it some sort of rope-a-dope type tactic from Liam Smith? You know, is he thinking that early on this guy's going to outbox him, but he can wear him down, and therefore there's no real point in even trying to compete for the early rounds? Because you wonder, Smith is getting in good positions. He's not really getting hurt. He's defending well. He's just not throwing enough lever back to actually win the rounds. So yeah, Smith comes out, does his thing. He's staying in the fight, and he's live in the fight. But it's kind of round 6 in my mind that he really comes alive. He shows a few punches in the early rounds, but it's kind of round 6 where he really gets involved. And he's really stalking John Thompson, you know, putting him under pressure. Thompson's back is often in the corner up against the ropes. And then Smith is starting to throw a jab. And Smith's jab is accurate. You know, he's able to get within Thompson's range round 6 because Thompson's punches are light. You know, they're not enough to keep someone like Liam Smith off. So Liam Smith is able to kind of come in, if you like, and to throw the jab and to land with a level of accuracy against John Thompson. And you notice that Thompson's head is getting snapped back by Liam Smith. And Liam Smith really goes from being 5-0 down in terms of rounds to a strong favourite in the fight in about 30 seconds. Because you realise that Thompson is very, very uncomfortable under pressure when Liam Smith is pushing him back and when Liam Smith is starting to throw back. Thompson looks like a nice fighter. He looks like a stylish fighter when he's allowed to dictate. You know, when he's allowed to keep Smith out of range, just throw long punches with fast hands. But when the pressure's on him, when he's taking lever back, he folds. And he folds remarkably quickly. I was actually quite disappointed in John Thompson, how easy it was for Liam Smith to simply adjust the pace and to get him out of there. It wasn't overly complex. Thompson's defence was open. He was easy to catch with a jab. The other thing I'd say, and I was impressed about Liam Smith, when he was looking to get Thompson out of there, you'll notice that he drops to the body. And it's something that he does, which is a sign of some experience and some maturity in the ring. Because, you know, Thompson's backing off, he's trying to circle away, he's trying to keep his hands off. And Smith starts peppering him to the body round 6, round 7. And then that creates the gaps, you know. Thompson was just trying to survive. He's in survival mode. He's getting smashed to the body, drops his hand, and then Smith takes him out. I like the way he went about business there, Smith. He stalked his prey. He timed it well. And yeah, literally, I mean, pretty much the minute Smith decided to turn on the pace, the fight was over. I don't think Smith is a magnificent puncher, and I think Smith can be outboxed, as we saw in the first 4 or 5 rounds. But what you'd have to say is that this was some sort of tactic from Liam Smith. I think it was quite noticeable that Thompson was tiring. He threw a lot of punches early on in this fight. He expended a lot of energy. Whereas, you know, Smith was more economical. You know, far more accurate, wasted less. Now, what I would say is, I think it's relevant that Smith had the experience of 12-round fights before. I know it was only against Eric Ochieng, which is a different kettle of fish, but Smith had prepared for 12 rounds before. He'd been 12 rounds before. John Thompson had never been beyond 8. And I saw round 5, round 6, I think Barry Jones in commentary saying he's really starting to push his punches out. And you could see how tired he was getting in there, John Thompson. Really tired. I highlighted in my pre-fight video that Thompson hadn't gone beyond 8. I didn't realise quite how significant that was going to be on the course of the night, especially with his activity in there. So I think that was one thing to factor in. Thompson's punch resistance isn't good. I mean, you know, Liam Smith is not the biggest puncher in the world. I think he's got like a 50% knockout ratio. But the second Smith started to land, it was game over. I mean, credit to Liam Smith. You know, great for him to be the first one of the Smith brothers to win a world title. He's often easily forgotten, being the only brother to still be boxing on Box Nation as opposed to Sky. He's perhaps slightly less glamorous of a fighter than the likes of Callum Smith. He's had less exposure than the likes of Paul Smith, but he's gone about his business. He's a likeable fighter. As I said in my pre-fight video, Liam Smith, he doesn't strike you as exceptional. He doesn't have exceptional punching power, exceptional hand speed, but what he is solid across the board. You know, solid defence, solid power, solid technique, a solid jab. And I know a lot of hardcore boxing people really, really rate Liam Smith. So credit to him for winning the world title. You know, it's funny in a way that he's the first of the brothers to get the job done and to win that world title belt. As to where he goes from here, I view him in a not dissimilar light to Terry Flanagan, actually, I must say. You know, I'm really impressed by him. I'm really pleased for him, but there's still questions to be answered. And I think we've got 2 world champions here who haven't yet fought the elite competition within their division, which will be very, very interesting to see as they step up in class. There's also a lot of domestic opportunity, especially for Terry Flanagan, even more so than Liam Smith. You know, you look at the fights out there for Terry Flanagan, and I'd almost rather see him fighting this high-level domestic competition as opposed to fighting the Magdalenos of this world. Let's put it that way. Anyway, just having a look at the chat. Let's talk about Smith struggling against Andrade. Yeah, I agree. I've been talking about Andrade for some time on this channel. Just look at what he did to Brian Rose. I think Smith's probably better than Brian Rose, but I think Andrade is at the minute a level or two above. He's been inactive though, Andrade, and he's one of these guys whose career is a bit in jeopardy because he hasn't been in the big fights, and he's kind of the forgotten man of the division. But on his day, he's a world class. Let's also talk about Austin Trout. Yeah, Austin Trout's kind of one of those awkward kind of characters where he's too good for his own good. You know, he's not a glamorous name. I don't see Frank Warren charging to put, you know, desperately trying to get Liam Smith in with Austin Trout, because Austin Trout would be a huge favourite there, and he doesn't bring a huge amount of money or fans. Parents says Andrade would perform similar to Thompson, but would not capitulate. Yeah, I think you're right. I think Andrade's got a bit more sting in his punch than Thompson as well. Bill Alkane, hello sir. He says, on another note, I would have not thought Liam would be the first of the Smith brothers. Exactly, very good point. Terence says, what's the noise in the background? Sounds like a jet engine. So Terence, when I do my normal videos, you know, the 5-minute, 10-minute ones, I can do them on my iPad. Luckily, that's pretty good quality. Unfortunately, if I do these longer videos, I have to do it through my laptop, which is, you know, 10 years old and pretty horrific. And it's actually, the jumbo jet noise is actually the laptop fan, I'm afraid. So yeah, hopefully if the channel, I've been saying this now for a good year, but hopefully if the channel picks up a bit and I get a few more subscribers and views, we'll buy a new laptop one day. But anyway, yeah, apologies for that. Bill Al says, you got to hand it to Warren. He gets his boxers big fights. Just when you think he's finished, he pulls it out of the bag. Yeah, very, very good point. And I should have mentioned that already. And this isn't an isolated incident either. Look at what he did with Frank Buglioni. I know Buglioni was unsuccessful, but, you know, Warren puts his money up and he gets his men shots. And at home as well. This isn't like when Eddie Hearn got, I don't know, Gavin Rees a fight against Broner or Lee Purdy a fight against Evan Alexander. Warren's been able to get winnable home fights for his men. Just looking down the chat here. D. Obianulli, I hope I pronounced that right. He says, Liam beat the brakes off a guy scared of his own shadow. He's the best of the Smiths, though I doubt he's world level. Flanagan has more potential. Fair enough. Callum says he thinks Flanagan beats Linares. That's a big fight. I think Flanagan should take on 2 or 3 of the domestic opponents first. I know there's obviously the Sky versus Frank Warren thing, but Kevin Mitchell or Luke Campbell would be a very interesting fight. Bilal says Hearn's more of a Sky employee. I don't think Warren would have accepted. Callum says Andrade fights next week. Yeah, I think he does, but against who? Is it a fight anyone's going to be interested in? Is it a fight anyone's going to watch? Possibly not. Terence says it sounds like his Dell XBS. Yeah, sorry about that. Oh, and apparently Andrade's fighting for the WBA and WBO title. It wasn't Liam Smith just announced WBO title, so who knows? These belts. Anyway, yeah, so that's my thought on those 2 fights. So let's talk about some of the other topics that have come up in the chat so far. And if you're watching live, I'm quite happy now to be a bit more reactive in terms of the topics. So if you've got any questions, any fights or fighters, any topics of discussion you want me to cover, you want to have a bit of back and forth on, now's the time to do it. But let's talk about the topics that have come up so far. So the Degale Bute, interesting fight. Should be an easy win for the Degale. I think Bute is too big for 168 pound. I think he moved up to 175 pound for good reason. Bute's a big name. I don't think he's ever beaten anyone of the Degale's capability. He's one of these guys who's actually got a relatively weak record in terms of the names he's beaten. Yeah, Degale's in his prime. Degale is a pretty world-class performer these days. I'd certainly have Andre Durrell over Bute as well. And I think Degale wins. Points or knockout, neither would surprise me. I probably haven't thought about it now for quite a few days since it's been announced. I'll probably be more inclined to go for the knockout, because I think Bute's punch distance is going to be down at 168. I think Bute's in the autumn of his career. James Degale really does seem to be hitting pretty hard these days. So that's my thoughts on that fight. As for the payment side, I have heard that Degale's getting $3.5 million, right? $3.5 million, that's about 2 million quid, is it? Maybe a bit more, 2.25 million. It's a lot of money, especially if you think that that's probably more than George Groves got when he fought Carl Frost at Wembley. Now, Kell Brook, I'm told, is getting 400 grand to fight Chavez. So there's a vast discrepancy there, and that kind of shows, to my mind, if you're like a world championship level fighter, but if you're not pay-per-view level, so I'm talking Selby, I'm talking McDonald, maybe I'm talking James Degale, the real money is signing with Al Heyman, and the real money is fighting on PVC. That's where you can get the mega paydays. Guys like Kell Brook is possibly right to stay with Eddie Hearn if he can get, I don't know, Manny Pacquiao, Amir Khan, one of those fights on Sky pay-per-view next year. Because, then he will make his £5 million fight, etc. But if I'm honest, if he's going to be fighting Diego Chavez and Leonard Bundu's of this world, if he wants to stay at that level of opposition, then Al Heyman's where the money is. And, that $3.5 million is a big payoff for James Degale, certainly. Bilal asks a question, what happened with your... Sorry, Bilal, I don't understand that question, mate. Could you write that again? Too Fast Fury, hello, sir. Does Quillen need a KO against Jacobs? I'd say so. In that fight, and I will do a video on it in more depth, because I like that fight, I strongly pick Peter Quillen. I think Danny Jacobs is very beatable. And I think Quillen will knock Danny Jacobs out, actually. Quillen is a massive puncher. He's one of the most underrated fighters out there, Quillen. And maybe he's slightly dislikable, some of the comments he's made, and the fact he hasn't fought Golovkin. But put that aside, Quillen is the number 2 middleweight by some way in my mind. A real big puncher. I think Danny Jacobs is too open. Look at Jacobs getting put in his arse by Sergio Mora last time. Mora punches pretty light. Quillen is a much bigger man than Sergio Mora. He's a much harder puncher, and he's a far superior fighter. I think Peter Quillen wins the fight by knockout, and it's a quite confident pick for me here. I think it's a relatively easy win for Peter Quillen. Callum says Furman Porter in December. Bilal says 2 million to beat. 2 million to beat James the Boot, Lucian Butte. Yeah, you're right. The one that they do love Heyman. Obviously says, I think Degale should briefly move up to take Stevenson's belt. I think Degale is right for £168, actually. I don't think he's too big at the weight, even though his nickname's Chunky. Don't get me wrong, I think he could beat Stevenson. I've heard James Degale has a magnificent chin from his sparring in the gym. I think he could easily beat Stevenson, but I still think there's big enough fights for him at 168 so that he doesn't have to put himself out of weight class. Callum says Furman versus Porter in December. That is a superb fight if it happens. Really look forward to that. And for me, it's the epitome of a 50-50 fight. I'm not overly sold on Keith Furman, especially after his more recent fights. And I think Porter can knock him out. Porter's a pretty big puncher. He really is. I know he maybe, he went 12 against Brook, he went 12 against Broner, but Porter's a big puncher. And Furman, some question mark over his chin for me. Some question if Furman is having to cut too much weight for me to get down to 147, and it started to affect his performance as he gets older. I'd make Keith Furman possibly a slight favourite in what I would say, in my mind, would be, if I was pricing the fight as a bookmaker, I'd have Keith Furman 10 to 11 on and Porter 11 to 10 against. And the reason I'd say that is because could Furman outbox Porter in the same way Kell Brook did? It will be hard, but it's possible. I think Porter is there to be outboxed, and I think Keith Furman could potentially do it. I do have question marks though about Furman's defence. Well, there is no defence. His punch resistance after the Lewis Calacho fight, and his weight. And any slip-ups and Porter would be there. So fascinating fight. Really, really hope it gets made. Very, very interesting if it does. D. Obianelli says, hey, do you know if Heyman is renting Matchroom fighters? I don't understand the arrangement. Right, this is a confusing one here. So I'll do my best to explain it, but forgive me if I don't give the best explanation because it is confusing. As I understand it, a fighter has a manager and a promoter. They're separate entities. On occasion, you'll get someone who manages and promotes a fighter, but they are perfectly entitled to be separate entities. Now, the manager is basically in charge of the fighter's business, namely who they fight and how much money they get paid. The promoter simply promotes the show. It's as simple as that. So the way I look at it is Al Heyman is working as James Degale's advisor, but Al Heyman essentially is taking a manager function. So Al Heyman will say, James, you can fight A, B or C, the purses will be X, Y and Z. Heyman advises Degale, they choose a fight. At that point, Heyman and Degale go to the promoter, Eddie Hearn, and say, we're fighting Lucien Boutte on this date for this amount of money. Would you like to promote it? And I believe Eddie Hearn's job at that stage is simply promoting it, as in potentially the venue, the broadcasting rights, that side of things. So essentially, if a fighter signs with Heyman, it doesn't affect the fact that they're promoted by Eddie Hearn. It simply means that Eddie Hearn has less steer and control over where they fight and who they fight. Essentially, that decision is made by Al Heyman as the manager, and Eddie Hearn just promotes it. Now, the reason that this is potentially putting Eddie Hearn's business in jeopardy is, say 50% of his fighters join Heyman. How's he going to keep up his broadcast schedule of the UK shows if there's so much more money in America? You know, that's the way I'm looking at it anyway. Bilal says, your shows would, you may, Tech Sports, you two are together, good. Yeah, we should actually do that. I speak to him fairly regularly, actually. I actually tweeted him about half an hour ago. Yeah, no, we should actually make an effort to do some more stuff together. I enjoy doing it with him, definitely. DLB and Ali says, Quillen Jacobs, I don't see the hype about this fight. Pointless fight outside of Brooklyn. I think that's a bit harsh. You know, they're two guys who are certainly in the top 10 of the middleweight division. Obviously, Golovkin is running riot through the division, and this is kind of going to help to cement a number 2 or a number 3, how you look at it. So it's an interesting fight for that perspective, and it's competitive, or it's deemed to be competitive. Callum says Furman would probably run all night against Porter and win on points because Porter's just too one-dimensional. I think there's scope for that. Porter can be outboxed. You're right, Callum, as well. One-dimensional. It's probably fair to say he doesn't have too many dimensions to his game, yeah. Gaz says Hearn is probably pimping his fighters out. It's all about pound notes with Hearn. I'm not sure about that because I don't understand how Hearn would financially gain from renting his fighters out to Heyman. I think Hearn makes his revenue from promoting shows, and I think having Degale Boutte on at, you know, non-peak time probably doesn't suit Hearn's business as much as having Degale versus some contender on pay-per-view in the UK. Too Fast Fury Rosado gave Quillen a tough fight, as I can see. Look at Quillen in the first 6 rounds against Andy Lee. I score it 6-0 to Peter Quillen with 2 knockdowns. I mean, that fight, Quillen had been very inactive and came in very, very heavy and actually missed weight. If Quillen can turn up disciplined, if he can get motivated for the fight, if he can turn up in shape, the way he outboxed Andy Lee, the early parry, so the accuracy, the way he was able to drop play, I think will be good enough to stop Danny Jacobs. I don't see Danny Jacobs as durable. Terence says, do you think Al Heyman could branch out into the UK? I think it would be quite a cool thing, having UK PBC fights on BBC ITV. Do you think it'd be good or bad? The way I see it, Terence, is that Al Heyman typically teams up with promoters, and this is, if you look at his business plan in the US, it's the same. So Al Heyman isn't a promoter; he doesn't hold a promoter's license. I don't believe. I might be wrong on that, but that's my understanding. And he tends to team up with a local promoter, and he just manages the fighters. So what I could see is Al Heyman managing fighters promoted by the likes of Eddie Hearn. But I don't see it being on BBC ITV. Firstly, I don't see them having the interest or the budget. Secondly, I think if he's teaming up with anyone, it's going to be Eddie Hearn, which means it's going to be on Sky. I don't think it'll be branded as PBC. I kind of see that as more American broadcasts. But yeah, I can certainly see Al Heyman manage fighters fight in the UK. I mean, we're already going to see that next year with probably Selby, Warrington, or Degale in fighting in the UK, etc. Callum, Quillen is a joke. He fights bums as long as he can get away with it. You say that, but he fought Andy Lee and Hassan Ndam and Jickham, who, in my opinion, are definite top 10s. And he's fighting Danny Jacobs, who's a definite top 10. I appreciate he stayed clear of the Triple G's of this world, but I think if you look at Quillen's resume, you'd certainly have to say that resume alone, he's top 3 or 4 in the middleweight division. D. Obi and Elise says, I think Porter's too gritty for Thurman. I think Porter could run into a KO. It's a 50-50 fight. Who's promoting this Bute Degale fight? That's hard to understand. That's a good question. I don't know the answer to who's promoting that, actually. I don't know. If anyone does know the answer as to who's promoting that, please comment. Bilal says the viewing figures coming out of America recently have been really low. How long can Heyman just throw stupid money at fighters without much coming in? Endlessly. I understand that he's got investors, he's got backers, and this is a very, very long game for him. Very, very long game. And he's not got financial concerns on that front. Gaz says, I bet Hearn is still making money from it somewhere. He's making money from the Fury fight, which is bugger all to do with him as a promoter. Yes and no. I think Eddie Hearn is a key part of the decision-making process as to which fights are put on Sky. That's the way I view it. So he has somewhat stuck his neck out to get that fight, is what I'm saying. I don't know the ins and outs, though. Right, let's talk about some of the other things. So pay-per-views, I wrote that down. Yeah, so Eddie Hearn is not making Brook Chavez pay-per-view. I did a video yesterday where I said that he'd obviously seen my video. Quite a few people seem to think I was being serious. It was obviously tongue-in-cheek, sarcasm. I don't expect that Eddie Hearn is remotely influenced by the Boxing Gossip channel with my almighty number of subscribers and views. Nevertheless, entertaining. And it is good that that fight isn't on pay-per-view, because I, for one, wouldn't have bought it on pay-per-view. And it's damaging to a guy like Kell Brook. You know, Kell Brook, not only is he not getting paid enough compared to the likes of James Degale, but if his pay-per-views are becoming humiliating with the few views he gets, and if no one tunes in to watch him, if guys like me don't even get to see him fight, it's poor for his exposure. So I'm pleased that it's not on pay-per-view. I think Chris Eubank Jr. is going to be on the undercard. I think Dave Allen versus Adam Makads for Central Area heavyweight titles on there. Possibly Gavin McDonnell as well. I need to look it up. But that's an interesting bill. That's the bill that I'm actually starting to look forward for. It's actually a good bill for Sky Saturday night. It's just a terrible bill for pay-per-view. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I'm pleased Eddie Hearn's taken note. November 28th, we go pay-per-view with Klitschko Fury. For me, that's a solid pay-per-view. I don't have a problem paying my 15 quid for that. I'm pretty confident December the 12th is going to be a pay-per-view for Eddie Hearn. It looks like the undercard there is going to be very strong. Chris Eubank Jr., Spike O'Sullivan, which is a fight that we'll talk about on my channel soon, as I've already said. Kevin Mitchell, Luke Campbell, possibly some sort of other world title shot, maybe even Tony Bellew in a world title shot. That's going to be a pay-per-view bill. So I think we've got November 28th and December 12th as pay-per-view bills. Interestingly, Box Nation go with Lee Saunders, attempt 3, not World War 3, attempt 3. Let's hope it happens this time round on December the 19th. So we've actually got a pretty good run into Christmas now, boxing-wise. And I think Eddie Hearn's got a big show planned in January as well. So it's a good run. Brook Chavez, free to air, late October. Then we've got Fury Klitschko, November, good fight. We've got White Joshua, Eubanks Spike, December. And then we've got Lee Saunders in December. So a lot of good action to look forward to. I'm very much excited for it, definitely. I think, will I pay my 2 pay-per-view? Yeah, I probably will. As I say, I'm not against pay-per-view. Obviously, I'd prefer to watch fights for free, wouldn't we all? But I understand that it has a time and a place. I understand that it helps make certain fights get made. And I understand that without pay-per-view, we wouldn't have seen some pretty big nights in boxing. So I'm not against it, but I am against the abuse of it. And Brook Chavez would have been the abuse of it. Gaz says pay-per-views are his favourite subject. D. Obianulli says, as real boxing fans, we can all find ways of watching fights such as streams. Pay-per-view doesn't apply to us true fans, so I don't see what the big deal is. I'm not 100% sure I agree with you there. For me, for a really big fight, let's go Fury Klitschko. I'm a boxing nut, you know. I'm a bit of a loser when it comes to these kind of events. So let me tell you, when it comes to Fury Klitschko, I will meet up with my 1 or 2 best mates. I'll probably get my brother to come down. We'll spend a day together. We'll get rid of all the various women in our lives, and we'll have 4 or 5 of us here. We'll order in some food. We'll have a few beers. We'll get into the undercard. And for me, personally, Fury Klitschko, I want on a big TV. I want it in crystal clear definition. Yeah, the streams have improved, but not to the point where, you know, for me, like, if the action's a bit fuzzy, if it cuts out, and maybe it's just my bad luck, but whenever I've streamed things in the past, not even boxing, or, you know, it just never seems to, it's never the same experience as watching it live. Now, under those circumstances, I'm happy to pay pay-per-view. You know, if I've got a few mates coming around, if I've got my brother coming around, if it's something we're really looking forward to, I'll pay 15 quid and I'll have it up on the TV and we'll make a big night of it, you know. Where it becomes difficult is if there's a pay-per-view night on, and I'll say to a few of my mates, do you want to watch Brook Chavez? And they say, who? Who's Chavez? I don't want to see that. I'm not going to pay for that. And then there's no night of it, and you're just paying 50 quid for your ordinary Saturday night boxing fight. That's like a typical way of measuring it for me. My friends know that I'm very into boxing, you know. If there's a big fight, if Froch Groves is on, Fury Klitschko's on, my phone is ringing 3 or 4 weeks out with people saying, what are you doing for the fight? Do you want to meet up? Do you want to go for a few beers? You know, that's not happening for Brook Chavez. So that's kind of how I look at it. Bilal's talking about UFC. I won't comment on that just because I don't know. DLB and Ule, over McKenzie rematch in Derby could lead to a Bellew rematch. I must say, isn't it funny that Over McKenzie could have been world champion before Bellew? It could do. I don't know what Oval's deal with Box Nation is. Don't know if that could get in the way. But yeah, it could do. Could do. Based on Bellew's recent performances, I think Bellew's looked the worst he's ever looked recently. I think he's looked terrible. I wouldn't rule out Oval beating him. Bellew's a favourite, but Oval can once again be the upsetter there, because Oval's looking better than Bellew at the minute, let me tell you that. Gaz, personally, I think a lineup has to be special for it to be pay-per-view. Pretty much all UK lineups to be free or on Sky. I think the match either has to be a world-class matchup, like Fury Klitschko, or it has to be a matchup that genuinely inspires interest. For me, it's all about interest. Let me give you an example. Billy Joe Saunders, Kashibank Jr. That was on Box Nation. Had that been on Sky, yeah, it's a European title fight, it's a British title fight, it's a Commonwealth level title fight. It's two guys who haven't fought world class opposition. People would say it's a free-to-air fight. But for that fight, my fight was ringing. For that fight, people who don't even watch boxing were calling me up saying, "Who's going to win? What are you doing on fight night? Can I come round? I've seen the press coverage. I want to see who wins this fight." That's a fight where the interest hits such levels. It could have been pay-per-view. It could have been. And I would have paid for it on pay-per-view. Brook Chavez, no. D, obviously, I don't rate Bellew very much either. Bellew has got to be the most overrated fighter in Britain. I'm not going to go into that now because I've actually got a video coming up which is going to be entitled something like the 5 most overrated fighters in Britain. But to give you a clue, Bellew may well feature on that. Bilal says, "Don't get boxing gossip on Bellew or Warrington." And to be fair to Warrington, Bellew, yeah, Bellew and me. Obviously, Bellew doesn't have a clue that I exist, but I mean, for me, Bellew is someone I could rant about for some time. Warrington, he impressed me last time out against Bronco. He's moving in the right direction. Still think Lee Selby teaches him a lesson, but Warrington is doing better. DLB and Lee, Warrington's a better man than I thought. He can show discipline and he's decent. I agree. Yeah, we're on the same page there. Better man than I thought. And Callum says, "Heads up on a great scrap in a couple of days. Mansour versus Washington on PBC." Yeah, I'm a big fan of the heavyweight scene. I'll check that out. I'm inclined to go with Mansour at this stage. I know Mansour's well into his 40s now, and you'd assume in the autumn of his career. But Gerald Washington, I'm not impressed about. And Mansour can really punch, so a Mansour knockout win doesn't surprise me there at all. Gaz, I don't think Kell Brook's a pay-per-view fighter now. If he gets the big fights, then maybe. The way I look at it is very few fighters are pay-per-view, whatever the opposition. You can argue that Carl Froch could return. He could fight my grandmother, and it would be pay-per-view because he's such a big name. He's pay-per-view. You could say the same about David Haye. Kell Brook's not at that level yet. Kell Brook can certainly be a pay-per-view fighter with the right opposition. But at the minute, it still needs to be the Khans, the Furmans, the Pacquiao's of this one. Bilal, I told you he had some skills. Warrington's better than average. Yeah, you're right. You're right. I underestimated him there. He is better than average. How much better than average he is, we're yet to find out. I'm not convinced that he's world level or anything like that. He says, Bilal's got to go. He says, "Keep up the good work. Thanks very much." And Bruce says, "Warrington, Gerald Washington has already lost to Maggie Aguilera." Yeah, I'm not impressed by Washington, and I think Mansour beats him. Right, I'm going to keep chatting now for another 10 minutes. We've been rolling for about 50 minutes or so here. So the one thing that I wanted to discuss that I haven't already discussed briefly is Triple G Lemieux. But if you've got anything else to raise, do leave it in the chat. We've got another 10 minutes or so to go. Triple G Lemieux, it's going to be an exciting fight. I'll be watching it. I'm sided with Triple G. I think he's the more durable fighter. I think he's the harder puncher. And I think he's the better boxer. Lemieux's a worthy challenger. He represents something different to what Triple G has fought before. He could spring an upset. Lemieux hits hard. Triple G's chin is supposedly good, but hasn't actually been tested against that big a puncher, in my opinion. And Triple G, is, in my opinion, is very, very overrated defensively. So if Lemieux can land on him and land on him early, could Lemieux spring an upset? It's possible. But I side to Triple G there. I think Triple G hits very, very hard, and I'm unsure about Lemieux's resistance. So I think Triple G knockout. It's an interesting fight. Lemieux is a worthy contender, and it's certainly the best fight of Triple G's career so far in terms of the level of opponent. D. Obianulli says, don't sleep on Mitchell Smith. He might be a real domestic rival. Yeah, Mitchell Smith's very good. I've seen Mitchell Smith fight live a few times. I think Smith beats Warrington. And I know Smith beats Warrington. Problem with Smith, I think, is I know Frank Warren's very high on him, and I know Smith's had a few setbacks in his careers. He hasn't always been the most disciplined, but Mitchell Smith is virtually unknown outside of the boxing hardcore. Virtually unknown. We need to see him in some bigger fights. We need to see him building his profile. At the minute, with the Skybox Nation divide, he's a million miles off getting a fight like Josh Warrington. Too Fast Fury, more interested in Quillen Jacobs than 1,000-time Furman against a bodybuilder. At least it'll be a skillful matchup. DLB Anuli, Triple G Lemieux is a bad mismatch. This is marketing at its best. It's not a good matchup. Callum says Fonfara Cleverly. Good one. I'm inclined to side with Cleverly here, which I know is controversial. Long-term subscribers know I'm a big fan of Cleverly, big fan of him. Again, a fighter I've followed, fighter I've seen fight live a few times. Fonfara, I think, is very, very overrated. You know, what is Fonfara known for? He's known for knocking out Chavez Jr. and going the distance against Adonis Stevenson. You know, Fonfara, he's not a big puncher for me. He's a bit one-paced. He's not the greatest technician. I think Cleverly's more athletic. I think he's got better hand speed. I think potentially he's the more eye-catching puncher. I think Cleverly is relatively durable, despite what happened with Kovalev. And I think Cleverly can outclass and outskill Fonfara. I think Cleverly can... I think it's a competitive fight. Very good fight. I'm inclined to go with Cleverly. I think Cleverly has been badly underrated. He's been bad... You know, Sergei Kovalev, the loss, was disappointing. But Kovalev is pound-for-pound level. Fonfara is not. Cleverly had no business at cruiserweight fighting Bellew in hindsight. No business at all. £25 was far too much. So my point is, Cleverly's been underrated. 2 dodgy but excusable performances. And before that, he was a top-class light heavyweight, top 5 in the world. People were talking about him fighting Hopkins and beating Hopkins. Similarly, I just think that Fonfara's been flattered. The form against Chavez Jr. means nothing to me. You know, Chavez Jr. was there to be beat that night. And the fact that he went the distance against Adonis Stevenson and didn't get knocked out tells me he's durable, but just not capable of beating a world-class fighter like Stevenson. I'm picking Cleverly, but it is a tight fight. It could go either way. Gaz says, who do I have as pound for pound number 1 right now? I'm presuming, Gaz, we're not going to say Floyd Mayweather. We're saying he's retired. I don't have Pacquiao number 1. I don't think Rigondeaux or Golovkin have fought the level of opposition required to be number 1. I like Sergei Kovalev. I probably wouldn't have him number 1, but I'd have him very, very high up the list. I think he's beaten very, very good opposition, and I think he's performed exceptionally well. I'd probably have it Andre Ward 1, Vladimir Klitschko 2, Kovalev 3. And that's without too much thinking. Andre Ward, I think he's got the top resume by far. The question for me is, am I being a bit kind to him, giving him number 1, where his only fight for years has been Paul Smith at a catchweight? I think over the balance of his career, he is the pound for pound number one. Vladimir Klitschko, vastly underrated in pound for pound conversations. 10 years of dominance. Just because he's heavyweight doesn't mean he can't be pound for pound. Sergei Kovalev, he's got the potential to be pound for pound number one. Superb fighter. Already got a very impressive resume. Diobionelli cleverly needs to get a real trainer. He changed with his mate. It's not ideal prep. Spot on. Terence says cleverly is a bold statement. Yeah, I agree. I really like cleverly though. Let me share a brief story. I've said this before on the channel, but I was lucky enough to attend what was in hindsight a relatively low profile fight. I think it was the fight before cleverly for Kovalev. And it was Cleverly versus a German light heavyweight. And I can't for the life of me remember the guy's name. But if you box track it, and I was sitting ringside for the fight. And we'd sat through a lot of good boxing that night. We'd seen Paul Butler fight before Paul Butler was world title. We'd seen Mitchell Smith fight. I think Chisora was on the card. And we'd seen people of all different weights and people who'd go on to be world champions, and people who'd fought in world championship fights. For me, Cleverly came out. It was Krasnicki, Cleverly Krasnicki. And this gap in class between Cleverly and Krasnicki. I know Krasnicki is not a world-class fighter, but the hand speed of Cleverly for a man of his size, the athleticism, the flurries of punches, the dominance, it was amazing. You know, to sit that close to it, it was like a blur. It was like seeing a Ferrari drive past. You know, Cleverly was, and I think the Kovalev loss really knocked confidence out of him. It really, really did. I think that was a crippling loss for his career. But if Cleverly can get back on track and go back to the days where he beat Bellew first time round, where he beat Krasnicki that night, he's got what it takes to be a top 5 light heavyweight. He's a class fighter on his day, Nathan Cleverly. He's one of the best we have in Britain if he turns up. But he's not a cruiserweight, and he's sort of the Sergei Kovalev level. Neither of which are any disgrace. From Farah, I don't see having the same upside. I see him as a very limited fighter. Tough, durable, but limited. As I say, I think Farah is immensely flattered by recent performances. Hugely overrated. The Chavez win means nothing. Going the distance with Adonis Stevenson just tells me he's durable. I think Cleverly can do it. Diobionelli, Vlad Klitschko's pound for pound of current active fighters. He's dominated his division. Yeah. I had him number 2. Can't argue with him being your number 1. Callum says peak and clear points as well. Nice one. Makes me feel better about my accumulator. Cheers, mate. Yeah, I don't think Clev stops from Farah. From Farah is durable and tough, but and Clev isn't a big puncher, but I'm picking him. Bruce, no Roman Gonzalez, no Chocolatito in your top 3. Callum goes for that as well. No, Bruce, it wasn't Bramer I saw, it was the Krasnicki fight. I know Krasnicki went on to fight Bramer, I believe. No Roman Gonzalez, you know. He's a good fighter, very exciting. He's clearly dominant in his division. And in many ways, I'm probably a bit ignorant of his work because of the division he fights in. It's not a division that I've got much knowledge about. So maybe that's why. Maybe it's my own lack of knowledge. What I would say is, in my mind, he just hasn't beaten the notable opposition. You know, Kovalev has beaten Nathan Cleverly, world champion, and Bernard Hopkins, Hall of Fame pound for pounder. Vladimir Klitschko has dominated the division for 10 years, beating David Haye, beating Povetkin, beating Pulev. I could name a few more, you know. Andre Ward's beating Carl Frost, Hall of Famer, pound for pound. He's beaten Mikhail Kessler. He's beaten Chad Dawson, who at the time was pound for pound, top 10, you know. I don't see that on Chocolatito just yet. As I say, just my opinion, and it possibly is due to lack of knowledge of that division. Too Fast Fury, did Gossip just say he's picking cleverly? I certainly did. Too Fast says, oh my God. Interesting. Who are you with then, Too Fast? You presume you're picking from Fora, but no, I'm picking cleverly. I really am. I rate cleverly very highly, as you can probably tell by watching this. Anyway, we've gone for an hour. We've discussed what I've wanted to discuss. We've discussed a few other different bits and bobs. I think that's me for now. I need to go and get some food or something like that. But yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in. Enjoyed it. Lots to come on the channel. As I say, we've got Eubank Spike coming up. We've got a Parker vid. We've got a heavyweight prospect vid coming up. We've got some chat about underrated fighters in Britain, which I was looking to cover today, but never got around to. We'll do it next time. Thanks very much for watching. If you've enjoyed this, please give me the thumbs up. If you're not already, please do subscribe to the channel. Wouldn't want you to miss out any of the new stuff coming through. Really appreciate everyone who's joined me and joined in the chat. Thanks very much for watching, guys. Have a good one.